Welcome to a very special edition of RetConned. As host Mike Kaye, and I'm joined by my RetConned brethren who are all living by the mantra of eat, sleep, retcon, repeat. Joining me tonight is the Gordon Sully of Mr. Roger Fisk, the smarkiest of smarks, Timothy Magnus Blekicki, and the man so invested in real agrees with Dana White and CM Punk that wrestling, Mr. Rick Fury. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. So we're here to talk about the second biggest night in WWE this year. And no, I'm not talking about SummerSlam. Let's take over to start us off. So, Timmy, what are your initial thoughts?
Of next?
Yeah,
next.
Sure.
I watched it all today, about the last hour last night. I was quite pleased by the whole thing. I think Triple H is starting an amazing revolution in wrestling outside of the Divas. I think he has gone back to actual wrestling. I hope he is basically the term. I think he has found a stable of wrestlers, top to bottom, jobbers that are comfortable with the term wrestlers and not sports entertainers. I think the main event should have redefined what main events should be. It should be the best card on the match. Nothing else should steal the spotlight from it. I think the women's match was an actual wrestling match. I don't think there was any sexuality involved. I don't think anybody in that match could have used the term puppies. I don't think the term bra and panties could have been used.
I would debate those points. I mean, Rick and I could probably throw a few of those in there, but
absolutely. But it was taken seriously. I think the ending of it left a little to be desired. I get what they were going for, but I wish they had just left it at kayfabe. I also understand at the same time that they were basically kind of ending that phase of Next, which I think they were signaling.
So
I was pleased.
Why do you keep calling it Next? Because I've never heard anyone else call it Next, just NXT.
Is Next not a common term?
No, I've never heard it.
That's just kind of what I've always called it. I've never, I guess it's one of those words you don't hear people pronounce out loud. I'm kind of in a wrestling devoid part of the country with other people that I talk to. So maybe it's just something I said.
Okay, so you're giving me a bunch of great segues here. So the first comment you made about going back to real wrestling, that's all I could think about watching NXT. I actually watched it this morning too. Out the WWE's notion of what wrestling is versus the old school like WCW. And what used to draw me more to WCW was the wrestling and the real like focus on wrestling. Now let's not talk once it got to like NWO .85, that kind of nonsense. But just, back in the day of the real wrestling back and forth and with the luchadors and everything else. So it's really interesting that I'm in the same boat, that it's almost like, wow, we get real wrestling back. We don't have the 5 moves of doom. We have something we can kind of enjoy together and really watch. So I'm totally on board with that too. And we made a couple of comments tonight, especially after the main event tonight, which we'll get to, that, it just, why are we getting this nonsense when we got the night before better?
Is it just a lack of faith in that carrying the product? I feel like that has to be what it boils down to. If you lose the term wrestler, if you lose the term belt and take it to title, if you take it to the next degree on that term, you're just losing what actual wrestling is. So is it not just a conscious decision to remove yourself of 1980s territorial wrestling into sports entertainment and taking NXT back to that, whether it be Triple H, Vince McMahon, Kevin Dunn, that whole mentality? If you're just flip-flopping between the two, is it looking at NXT as a territory and that they can get away from it, or is it just is it not transposing onto the main level? Do they not have faith in it carrying a national audience?
There may be some truth to that, and there's also something I heard that especially for the John Cena level people that they don't want out of action for long periods of time, that they give them 5 moves that are relatively safe. They're able to do night after night. They're able to piece together these matches with a few things in between, maybe spice it up here and there. But that way you've got less liability, and your cash cow is always safe and sound. Have these characters that they're able to draw off of night after night as they go through this, as opposed to when you're doing crazy crap like they do on the Independents night in, night out, you could break your neck and then John Cena's gone the next day.
All right, but if we go back to the Attitude Era, and I don't necessarily mean Attitude Era as all right, if you take the Attitude Era as a representation of the late 1990s, where I feel culturally there was a backlash against the conservatism of the 80s, the confusion of the early 90s, and an explosion of whatever the late 90s was when it comes to music, when it comes to movies, and just kind of the loosey-goosey. Was there the 5 moves of doom in the late 90s? Yes, Bret Hart had his.
On had his. Dude,
Kind
everybody.
of, but did he not constantly mix things up? Did Austin had his 5 moves of doom, but did he not constantly introduce different things? Did he not keep it interesting? Did Brian Pillman, I don't necessarily feel like there was a script per se. Same area that Triple H was coming up in, that Rock was coming up in, and they were constantly mixing stuff up. They had the go-to moves, but I felt like they constantly were adding to them. It is, and that's kind of what I feel like Next is doing, or NXT is doing. They have their staple moves, but even like Kevin Owens, now that he's hit the main roster, he's brought a few of these things from NXT up, but it's almost like every match something a little different. No?
Well, I kind of agree and disagree with you, but we've hit our 5-minute mark on NXT, so I'm thinking that we kind of wrap this thing up because we got a lot more to talk about from SummerSlam. But I do see your point, but my thought is, and particularly with Shawn, it's more about his wrestling style than it was him adding moves or making things. It was just the way he sold, maneuvered around in the ring, and I think that's what you're seeing with the NXT people more. So yeah, they've got their 5 moves of doom, but they mix it up by their moves in the ring, as opposed to what you see in where it's the 5 moves of doom and then you just move back and forth in the ring. There's not really that different style in there. They're all working the exact same style. They're not mixing anything together. So anyway, on to SummerSlam. So let's get started to talk about, let's see, what was our first match? Oh man, I wish Rick could talk to us a little bit about this, because I want to know what in the world is appealing about Randy Orton and Sheamus. I'm sorry, that had to be the most boring match for me personally, and it's not because either of these guys can't work or anything like that. I just find the feud bland. I find what Randy Orton has done bland, and Sheamus, I'm still racking my brain as to why he's got the Money in the Bank briefcase.
To be a formula thing. I think the basic formula, if you say Sheamus, I think your basic Sheamus match is going to be the tiniest bit above average. I think Randy Orton's actually doing pretty decent recently. I know he's been railed against for the whole, but his average match is a little above average. So put them together, I feel like the match was a touch above average. I think you just nailed it on the head, though. There was nothing for them to feud against. There was nothing for them to feud about. There was no reason. I mean, even I almost feel like the WWE kind of admitted it, considering they didn't make this an actual match until the last week or two, even though they were feuding. There was no real reason for having them to feud other than just having them on. Sheamus having the briefcase, it makes no sense to me. The only thing I can think is that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 is coming out next year. Let them have the briefcase until then. Let them cash it in, get some notoriety. It makes no sense to me. The only thing I can speculate upon is that it was almost a, hey, sign a new contract, stick with us, we're going to promote you, you'll get this bump, this push. I have no idea. It was killer, and honestly, its place on the card, I almost feel like it should have taken the Kevin Owens Cesaro match second to last. It would have been a cool down match, and Cesaro should have gone on first. I have no idea why this match went on when it did, and the decision of it, I don't know what they're going to do going forward from it.
As you make me mark out a little bit, because I just realized that both, is it Rocksteady or Bebop that he's playing? Rocksteady, right?
Rocksteady, yeah.
I just realized that Rocksteady and
Isn't Bebop the Warthog?
All right, tell you what, whichever mutant he's playing in Ninja Turtles, we had both that mutant and we had Casey Jones on the same card. How cool is that?
Ooh, good call. I didn't think about
that. All right.
Okay, we had it confirmed. It was Rocksteady. Okay, good. All right, so on to the tag team match. We had a lot of people in there that they seem like they're right on something really cool, and none of them besides, I think, New Day are really breaking out into that. I feel like the primetime players, although they were champs, they were doing these really great videos that they'd show like before their matches and stuff, where they'd be making fun of people and stuff. I thought that they were like, wow, they're showing some personality, but you throw the belts on them, and then besides their goofy little dance, they're kind of boring. I mean, I love Titus. I think that guy is going to go places eventually, but just as champions, they were kind of like, kind of stiff. Then you got New Day, who's just like blowing it out of the water here. I mean, they're doing an amazing job. Lucha Dragons, which are really fun to watch as far as I've gotten with them. And I guess Los Matadors, I can't really throw them in the same boat because they haven't done much lately. El Torito does more than they do.
Yeah, Lucha Dragons would win the match simply because and honestly, this was my entire logical base upon making that prediction, was for what, 2 or 3 WrestleManias now, we've heard this rumor that Vince is going to go for the most amount of people wearing a mask at a single event, Guinness Book of World Records sort of situation. And with Ray no longer being there, I just kind of assumed at WrestleMania 32, Dallas, there's going to be 100,000 people there. There's no doubt in my mind. They're going to give tickets away to make sure that they hit $100,000 or 100,000 people. My word on that they would attempt this record, because it's never going to be broken if they do it. And I just kind of figured if they're going to start pushing them, they would start pushing them now. Plus, they have such a TV-friendly style of wrestling. I kind of thought the push would start happening now. They would win it, they would lose it, they would win it, they would lose it, and then maybe at Mania they would have some sort of blow-off feud. And well, it's so TV-friendly, their style. It's so reminiscent. Kalisto is just amazing. I don't understand why they pulled both of them up. Well, I mean, Sin Cara was already there, and Sin Cara was, who is that? Who is that? It's not the original Sin Cara. It's
I don't remember the guy's name, to be honest.
Hunico
yes.
guy when they were.
Yes. So I just kind of assumed that, I mean, this would be their opportunity, put them on a big market, smack them, plop down, give them and especially with Kalisto's shine in the beginning of the match, I was like, okay, cool. He's going to get this shine and then, fall out. And then at the end, especially with those goofy rules, they all of a sudden announced at the end, I was like, no, this is going to happen for them and they'll get a little bit of a push. I'm completely okay with New Day winning. I love their gimmick. I wish they had, Mike, you brought it up wish they had brought Bo Dallas into it as the Owen Hart figure. It is what it is. It happened. I mean, where do they go from here? I have no idea. And honestly, there's nothing about it that makes me care about it.
All right. So speaking care about something, Dolph Ziggler versus Rusev. Tim, you put it best when we were texting back and forth. 2 guys that you really want to care about. Dolph by himself, really fun to watch, bumping around like he's Shawn Michaels. Rusev, who is this monster until, of course, he gets fed to John Cena. But there's nothing that really made you want to believe match. I mean, when Rusev got hurt, it was like his perfect out. It's like, hey, let's get him off. We'll take him out for a while. Dolph can go do something else. We'll bring him back. He'll be a monster again. No, they just made him a sad little fanboy and stuck him with Summer Rae.
Yeah, perfectly put. I have no idea what they were thinking with the whole situation. Ziggs, it seems like he's unhappy being there, and I almost feel like it shows sometimes. He's invested, he's not invested, he's invested. He cuts the same interview every time he cuts an interview. His in-ring style has not evolved at all. He runs the same 5 moves of doom, which I know is basic, but he just doesn't seem invested. And Rusev, especially after the injury, I know I made this comment tonight, but he was almost at a face level when he left. It wasn't necessarily like they were pushing or the fans see him as a face, but had he disappeared, I mean, completely off the map, disappeared, and come back and drop the Russian gimmick and let Lana move on and just distance himself from it, and just kind of like a Taz, Samoa Joe submission machine sort of character, I feel like they could have found a spot for him against heels such as Wyatt, who I almost feel like needs a face move himself, but against those like stiffer, heel types, Ziggs, I just feel like is desperately in need of a heel turn. He begs to be booed. He bumps like he's a heel. He wrestles like he's a heel, and him and Lana just have no chemistry. There's nothing that makes me feel like they're invested in each other. There's nothing that makes me feel like it's anything. The stupid pun, but like it's a summer fling. They're not going to last. Her horrible acid wash attire tonight just screamed that WWE has given up on her being any sort of face of the female face. I know that was a big thing in Vogue a couple months ago, which I think is a really, really, really big shame. I feel like she could have taken that understudy to Stephanie McMahon position that I think they're priming her for.
I'm still stuck on the white trash attire that you didn't like coming from your part of the world.
Oh, because you didn't come from this part of the world too?
Wait, be fair. I was down in Florida first. I just got a taste of what you guys were,
Oh, if you move up here when you're like 10, you didn't come from Florida.
Well, let's just say I moved past trashy girls. Anyway. So anyway, going back, with Ziggler, I'm in agreement with all that you're saying. But, the one thing is that a saving grace is I hear they're eventually going to stick them back together. That's kind of where this is all going to end. It may not end right after the Ziggler. It's supposed to eventually end up with Rusev and Lana having this like reconciliation, and Rusev's a badass again because he's got his Lana back. So I don't know.
I mean, that makes sense, but does it not almost make more sense if Lana had stayed heel and he turned face? Almost that like Macho Man Elizabeth on Fast Forward sort of situation. I don't feel like it makes any sense to have it flip-flop and Lana be with Ziggs, no chemistry. Like what's going to make me feel like this is a rewarding conclusion to any sort of situation, which apparently is not WWE's Operatus Mondiati. If they just stick them back together in 6 months and they just are back together.
All right, so let's talk about something that was at least rewarding for me because I'm a huge Arrow mark. So we got King Barrett and Stardust versus and Neville. So other than the fact that King Barrett was really just kind of thrown into this match, and, I read it was because The Miz was originally going to be in here, but then they really wanted to have this IC title match. I really enjoyed this. And, of course, it's because I'm a Stephen Amell mark. But besides that, I thought he did a really good job. We see a lot of celebrities come, might take a bump. They might do a horrible move. But he did pretty well. He's a very active guy. He came in, and he wasn't perfect by any means. But, coming off the top rope, doing, what was it? He did an enziguri that I was like, good. So a little bit of a short match. You pointed out he really should have got the pin for what this was, but overall, I had fun with it.
I'm glad you did. I didn't. The entire thing, I wish it had been a singles match. I wish I hadn't been involved. I don't understand Neville's inclusion other than the fact that him and Barrett have feuded since King of the Ring, and so they're tied together. And honestly, King of the Ring was about when Cody and him, and Stephen Amell started feuding, and then Dusty's unfortunate passing pause on the whole situation, and I just don't understand. And I obviously tag matches are put together to hide celebrities, their inefficiencies in wrestling matches. I completely get everything why it was put together, and even while we were texting, we all complimented basically all of Amell's athletic maneuvers. Something just lacked throughout the entire thing. He should have absolutely gotten the pin. It makes no sense why he didn't, even if it was a red arrow into a tag into a pin, which would have looked lame, but it still would have been a pin on Stardust, considering that's what the actual feud was about. You're going to end a feud on two people who, the feud wasn't even about. How do you... And I don't know, I almost... Stephen Amell showed more athleticism. He showed more athleticism during his run-in last week on Raw, or the week before, than he did during the actual match.
Ooh, I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't know. He hopped that barrier and then hopped the top rope pretty quickly.
Dude, man jumped in the ring, did an enziguri, did a backflip onto his feet. I did
but how? What I mean by that is it was almost like the run-in. Everything that he did was his own. In the way that he did the backflip is actually more of the person, that is boosting him up rather than the person performing the actual act.
You got to think how many times was this probably rehearsed? Because he's a celebrity and because. Safe, they probably did those exact same 6 moves that he did 150 times,
I would like to think if you're going to invest yourself in performing on SummerSlam that you're going to at least spend a week practicing them in the ring with somebody. It just seemed a little loose. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we talked in the round table tonight. In the long run of celebrity performances in the ring, as much as I didn't like it, it probably was the best. It probably was the most athletic display anybody has ever shown until Ronda Rousey gets in the ring next year against Stephanie.
All right, fair enough. So let's talk one that I know you and I are going to disagree on because I actually kind of dig these guys. So let's talk the IC. We got Ryback, we got Miz, and the Big Show. So this is something we were supposed to have, month or maybe it was 2 months ago. I can't remember which pay-per-view it was supposed to be on. But we have Ryback as champion. We got Miz as the little guy in between the two big guys, and we got the Big Show. So my kind of feeling on this is I really feel like Ryback is going to be our next big man. There's always going to be a big man somewhere in the Federation, and I feel like he's our guy. Big Show will eventually retire here. He's been talking about how he wants to probably do come in and just work a program here and there already. And then Miz, I got to tell you, this match, Miz made the match because he was the comic relief of just trying to be like the little weasel who stole the pin every time. And that it was a lot more amusing just because of that.
I actually agree. This match probably took me by the most surprise. I think they kept it at the perfect length. The ending I felt was lacking a little bit, but it was what it was. But it was super quick pace. Especially considering Big Show and Ryback were involved. Miz is a little surprising. I almost feel like he's kind of taken up the role that David Otunga had a couple years ago, where they keep him involved because he does so much for them off camera. If you caught any of those video packages that they had at they were just doing the whole like WWE invades Brooklyn / New York sort of situations. It almost seemed like every 4 or 5 camera cuts, Miz was involved somewhere. He was at Yankee Stadium. He was here. He was there. He's just super camera friendly. So Miz isn't going anywhere for a long time. And you nailed it on the head. He absolutely played the I'm not a face, I'm not a heel, and obviously he heel. I just mean he kept like bouncing back and forth. Like I'm just gonna play the devious, that prime opportunity. I'm gonna get a pin wherever I can and try to steal whatever I can. I'm gonna side with this guy. I'm gonna side with that guy. Help whoever I can to try to get a pin, sort of situation. Ryback is apparently destined for some sort of role in this company. It might be as the name big guy. That his style still just lacks something for me. I don't get it. I don't understand what he's trying to do in the ring. When we say 5 moves of doom, I feel like he has 2 moves of doom, and I don't even understand what his 2 moves of doom are.
Well, one of them is getting CM Punk to leave the WWE. That was one of his best moves.
I don't agree with that whatsoever. And apparently breaking up CM Punk leading the Shield, which we'll discuss at a later date. He is what he is. I don't get it. I don't understand why I should care for this character. He has a catchy catchphrase. He has T-shirts. He's big. I liked him more as Skip Sheffield than I like him as Ryback. And he wasn't anything as Skip Sheffield. It is what it is. The IC title's cursed. I just hope to God Rollins goes after it and gets it. It's the only hope for it.
All right, so Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, and the Wyatt family, or versus the Wyatt family. I feel like this match could have gone so many places, but I don't feel like it did at all. It was a very generic match. Had the 2 guys, against the Wyatt family. It's almost like this, but lighter because we're missing 2 of the people. I thought we could have brought back the one dude from the Wyatt family. Dean Ambrose could have turned. We could have had something out of this match, and nothing happened.
They wanted. It was a placeholder match, which I wasn't expecting. I got all week for the past month that something was going to happen during this match, and nothing happened. It happened very fast. I actually very much appreciated the fast pace of it. I kind of thought they were going to give it more time. I kept expecting rest holds. I don't know if they cut time away from it or if going into the match they expected it to be so short. It hit all of its notes that it was supposed to. In a weird way, I almost felt like it was a squash match. It fed completely into this Ambrose Reigns quasi-Shield promotion that they're going for, which if that's what they're aiming for, if a heel turn does not happen between that they're promoting, I don't know what they're going for. And honestly, the biggest feeling I got out of it was poor Wyatt. What does this poor guy have to do to get over?
Okay. Let's get on to our title match, which somehow or another, it's just in the middle of the card already. So we got Seth Rollins versus John Cena, and I was surprised by this. I mean, Rollins really pulled out all the stops on this match, did some great work in the thing. That soup came down and then came into, I think it was the, what do they call that move? The broken arrow where it falls down. But anyway, I mean, it was just an amazing move. He comes off and does his Phoenix splash. I mean, Rollins was running on all cylinders. And he, we kind of talked about this in the roundtable, but he played a little face tonight, so it was kind of interesting to see him kind of work on it a little bit differently. And then the finish of the match, I liked it. You know what I mean? It's one of those where you got another celebrity involved, but it was just amusing. It made us all laugh, and I liked it.
The only complaint I have about that match was how long it took, and honestly, I blame Cena. The only thing I have to complain about it is that Stewart got to the ring and he had the chair, and he should have motioned at Rollins, and then immediately hit Cena. And for whatever, it almost seemed like Cena was sandbagging him and drawing it out and drawing it out. It were almost looked like he pop up so he could just go ahead and hit him, but he had to wait, and he had to kind of almost look back at Rollins and then look back at Cena. The entire match, Rollins is just so amazing. He's my favorite thing going in WWE right now. I feel like his booking is almost so bad it's on par with how they booked CM Punk as champion. They used to make Edge look like a chicken shit heel, and I understood it fit his character and it fits Rollins' character, but the way that they've almost like endorsed him through the authority, but then that endorsement away, but given it back, but like made him prove himself. He shouldn't have to go through all that. He is what he is, and now if I'm not mistaken, it's the only two-time belt holder, basically dual belt holder since I can really think of. You said it best, Mike. If that's what they're going for, if he just ends up coming on and saying, like, I don't need this belt, and throws it in a trash to like a tournament for the U.S. belt, then they should have just given it to Owens the month before. Because other than that basically the only person that puts over is Jon Stewart.
All right.
Because again, it just makes Rollins look like he needs help. Last month he needed Taker's help to beat Lesnar. A couple months ago he needed the authorities. It just constantly makes him look like he can't stand on his own 2 feet.
So let's move on to the women's match. And, I originally got really excited for this match because I thought that it was going to be like it wasn't like team elimination, that you had to eliminate every member of the team. And I was like, wow, that could actually turn into a really cool, they do it NXT style. But again, we end up with a Divas match. And I'm glad that PCB, worst name in history, won. But it's still just... it kind of lacked there, or what it could have been. I mean, just because we were given Sasha versus Bayley, which was so amazing, and tear-jerking, and then you get this.
It should, you nailed it on the head. It should have been a Survivor Series sort of elimination. Some of these people involved, they're basically grandfathering them in from the previous Divas generation, I guess you suppose. And honestly, if you look at it, you can't get rid of the Bellas. And let's be honest, you can't get rid of the Bellas basically because who they're connected to outside of their own in-ring personas, Daniel Bryan and John Cena. Tamina, I just under no circumstances understand her inclusion in this. I feel like there's 15 other divas that you basically could put in her position. It should have been. I would have even dealt with a fatal four-way sort of situation better than this match, especially after last night, especially after what you see on NXT on a weekly basis. And we had discussed it a little bit in the roundtable about how when Paige coming up out of NXT, when her and Emma were fighting in NXT, week in and week out, my jaw would drop watching what the Divas were doing on the main roster and what these two specifically were doing on NXT's roster. And I was so confused. Maybe AJ, I could see the styles coalescing. I just didn't understand what was going to happen between. And then Paige comes in and defeats AJ, but AJ goes away for a little while, and Paige just rocks it out of this world with Natalie and that person. She almost seems to elevate the talent that she was in the ring with. And it was almost like how after this person and that person got injured and Paige got a little more settled, Paige actually lost a little bit of her spark and started wrestling more of a main roster style. And it was very disappointing to see. And even though these new girls have like stepped up and come in, I don't necessarily see Paige going back to her roots and wrestling in that NXT style. I see her almost dragging these other girls down. I still think Paige, even over these other girls, women. I apologize for using the term girls. These other women, they don't bump as hard as Paige does. Paige has a very, very English style of bumping. It's so reminiscent of William Regal. It's crazy. She's just so hard with her bump. She sells hard. And I just hope that they don't tame these women. I hope they don't cut of them. And I feel like this match did that, especially after last night. And the whole in-ring thing with them last night, I actually wasn't a big fan of that. I felt, I understand what it was for. It was signaling an end to that era in NXT. But I like to keep my stuff kayfabe only. And that's part of the reason the whole curtain call in 96 I felt was so impactful, is because it really did take that Zapruder film out of the stands to see that hug. And the fact that they kind of telegraphed it in the ring last night, it was a little cheesy to me.
Well, but I'll be honest with you, after single divas match, especially where they go that hard, they've always hugged it out. Now the four of them didn't. That was a little new, but they were the four horsemen or four horsewomen, excuse me, of NXT. So that's why I think it was a little bit different. I honestly loved it, dude. I mean, it showed. I mean, these girls seem to really care. They seem to really want to do something different, and you can see every one of them is doing something and really. So I don't know. I had a lot of fun with it. I think that it was a great way to that, and we were all talking about in the roundtable, but it was just great storytelling too. The whole thing with Bayley, how she was the forgotten horse woman, and how she finally made it to that level of the game. So I thought that was pretty cool. All right, so on to Kevin Owens and Cesaro. So Kevin Owens needed a win here. You read about how he fell from grace after that last Cena loss. It kind of felt that way too. I mean, they're at least putting him in a few high-profile matches, but he's not getting very many in the win column. The sad thing about that, though, is Cesaro, who's finally starting to get a little bit of traction here, had to eat the pin from him.
Just shows management's dissatisfaction with Cesaro's mic skills. It's the only thing he lacks. I'm assuming they just have no faith in him. He has everything else. They cannot claim that the crowd does not get behind him. His merch sales just are lacking. At the same time, I'm not a big WWE shop zone fan. So I don't know necessarily out there for him, but he's certainly not wearing anything to the ring I would buy. They're not getting behind him. I feel like if they, honest to goodness, gave him a push, and I know that's a very ambiguous term that us smarks throw around, and it's an that does not necessarily always mean what we think it means, but he has potential. He has something that so many other people are lacking. Owens himself, I know there's discussion of there being a debate between Kevin Dunn. I don't know how much of that is fabricated and how much of it is true, and if anybody's trying to bury anybody per se. To me, he has it all. I don't care about his look. I don't care that he's slightly overweight. I think he has an in-ring style that just overrides all of that. I think he has it all. And he has the potential to be a main player if they put their weight behind him. But if they keep doing what they're doing with him, he's going to end up in that Bray Wyatt zone where he's going to be a jobber to the stars, and he's just going to stay at that like upper mid-card level, always sniffing the main event, and he's never going to get there. But they need to make it happen fast, because just like Bray, if Bray doesn't make that breakthrough soon, It's never going to happen for him. Nobody's ever going to take him seriously. So I actually thought they made the right call with the victory. Even I predicted Cesaro, but I see why they did what they did. They just need to tread carefully with both of those. They both need all the support they can get.
So speaking of never bringing the main event, we got to start talking about it. So Undertaker versus Brock. I don't know what I was expecting out of this. We were there live when Brock beat Taker, and it was supposedly that was because of Taker's concussion. I think it's because Taker is just done. I mean, I get the gimmick, I get the nostalgia, I get all that kind of fun stuff, but my God, when he's blowing up 3/4 of the way into the match, not even 1/4 of the way into the match, it's not that much fun anymore. They can do a few things. The striking plays to him very well, and then the finish was just horrific. The only thing I can think here where we're going with this, and I mentioned the round table, was the fact that we're probably going to have a heel Taker for a little bit. Brock's probably going to try and get his win back, which whether they call it a rubber band match or not, and into WrestleMania with this, and possibly have a retirement match. I don't know. That's the only thought I could think of here.
It makes no sense to me either. I was shocked that they brought him back for this event. I read something where looked at the numbers and just thought that maybe the SummerSlam was an opportunity to boost network viewership, which, okay, that makes sense. But then the continual investment into this character, which you nailed it on the head with the fact that they started playing back towards almost like his supernatural abilities, just makes no sense. If you wanted to play him off as a bloodthirsty revenge addict, all right, maybe I'll buy into that. But give me this early 90s, late 90s, he's the sorcerer of the darkness nonsense. It no longer plays. You have to. I don't even know how you would play it. It just no longer makes sense. We joked around about so why were they in the same building in Santa Clara at Mania? He didn't seek his revenge then during the main event. Had he come out and tombstoned him during the main event, giving Rollins the win, yeah, maybe that makes sense. Maybe that makes it a little more interesting. If Taker is just posed as the veteran and doesn't think, I mean, how do you even play that? I mean, Brock hasn't paid his dues. Brock hasn't. It just, none of it makes sense. The feud didn't make sense. It was so ill-timed. Ruined last month's pay-per-view because I thought Rollins Lesnar, up until the interruption, was a great main event. It just played off.
That does make sense. When in the history of WWE has the timekeeper hit the bell when he saw somebody tap out?
It almost reminded me of some like Attitude nonsense where the Vince's minions were at the timekeeper table. It almost reminded me of the double pin situation, of the double elimination in the Royal Rumble. I don't like to think that they're going to go for a rubber match at Mania because I didn't think the first match was all that great. I didn't think this match was all that great. So the idea that they're going to have a third one makes me even more sick to my stomach. But that's exactly what it leads me to think that they're going to try to do. But in the way that they did it with the hidden tap out, because they're trying to play Taker as the heel, considering he's had 3 nut shots in basically 3 appearances, but nobody's booing Taker. Taker's not the heel in this situation. Even the crowd itself seemed evenly divided between face and heel. It just almost seemed face versus face. Honestly, it just makes no sense, and especially to do it in such a condescending, Charles Robinson popping up and being like, I didn't call for that bell. Nut shot. I didn't even hear a bell to reopen the match. It almost seemed like they had a script, but once it started to go down, nobody knew exactly how it was going to go down, and so nobody knew exactly how to do it. The only redeeming factor was the middle finger from Brock. But even that,
Agreed.
I almost felt like Charles Robinson should have done the 3 hands. And I could be completely wrong on this. Was when Austin passed out to Bret Hart, did they do the 3 arms thing?
Roger unfortunately dropped off. Otherwise, we could have used his, like I said, Gordon Soley intellect, but I don't think so. I think you're right on there. And the middle finger, wait till that gets blurred out tomorrow on Raw anyway.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That entire thing's not even going to be shown, basically. That was a pay-per-view only thing.
There was a spot of blood, too, so of course that would eliminate it.
Yeah, exactly. So all the scenes will be in black and white. I don't get it. I mean, I understand that maybe they wanted to give Taker his win back, but could you not have done it almost like you had done it when Lesnar first came back and Cena got the cheap chain shot? Giving Taker some sort of advantage other than a nut shot and a restart. I mean, it almost screamed WC.
Well, what's funny, to your point about a nut shot, who the hell uses nut shot? Long time, I think, since we've seen that old school Ric Flair get on his knees and then do the nut shot kind of thing.
Exactly. Where did Ric Flair come from? It's so WCW. It's so it doesn't even play today. I'm so interested in seeing how people respond to this. I'm obviously we started recording after the pay-per-view, so I haven't had a chance to jump online and see how people are responding to it, but it's so old school almost that it doesn't play anymore. That's what I was trying to get across in our roundtable almost. I almost feel like Vince still has that weird sort of tie in it to the Attitude Era, to that possibly even the Aggression Era, that he thinks Taker is still a viable, and I'm sure he still moves merch, and I'm sure, I mean, obviously just the crowd response to him said that he's still a viable character, but he no longer needs the victories to get that response. I made the comment tonight that 22-2 or 21-2 is no worse than 22-1, or however the math works out. He should have lost to Wyatt this past year. He should be giving up victories now. He should not still be winning.
Well, here's to the hope that next year he will read peace. I want to thank everybody for listening in this week. Roger Fist, Rick Rivera, Tim Blekicki, and I have been your host, Mike Kaye, reminding you it's all true until we get RetConned.